I'm working on this Remix app. It is based off of a template from Tailwind UI, and it's pretty simple. It's got this home page. We can click Get Started here to register an account, or we can sign in to an account we already have. And today I'm going to show you how to use AuthKit to add user management to this app. Now let's come over to AuthKit.com, and to use AuthKit, we'll need a WorkOS account. So we can click on WorkOS, click Get Started, and here we can sign up for WorkOS. I'll enter my username and a password. And once I verify this, I'll be logged into my dashboard. And there's a lot of cool stuff in here. Today, we're going to be focused on users. We can see we have a dashboard here. We can create users, but we're going to be doing this programmatically from our application. So let's see how to do that. And right here, we'll see that there's a quick start. We just need to copy these environment variables to our app. So let's start with the WorkOS client ID, and we'll come back over to our Remix app. Let's go ahead and pop open the sidebar, and we'll open our env file, and we will add WorkOS client ID, and we'll also grab the API key, WorkOS API key, and we should be good to go. Now let's go ahead and install the npm package. So we'll come down here. I'll go ahead and stop my dev server, and we'll install WorkOS Inc/node. And now we're ready to wire up AuthKit's Headless APIs to our existing app to link it to our new WorkOS account. So let's start with kind of the first flow that makes sense. When we click Get Started here, we see that we are able to register for a new account. So let's come to our app. We'll open up routes. And this is the register route, which we can see if we look in the URL bar here. So this is a pretty standard Remix form. It's rendering some fields, and it's using Remix form to post to this route. And right now we have this action. So if we were to fill this out, Bob Barker, bob@priceisright.com, and paste in a password and hit sign up. Well, we don't see anything yet, but if we open the terminal, we'll see our console log right here to do register the user. So let's start by getting the form data from the request, and we can just use kind of standard Remix APIs here, request.formData. This is a promise that we can await, and we can assign this to a form data object. And then we'll go ahead and grab the data by using object.fromEntries form data. And now we can console log the data. And if we submit this again, there we see all the data from our form is showing up. And this is where we want to use this data to create a user in WorkOS. Let me show you how easy this is. We just want to new up a WorkOS. And this is a constructor that comes from the npm package we installed. And we can assign this instance to a local variable. And all we need to do is pass in our API key right here, which we got from the quick start. It is this environment variable. So let's copy that, and we'll get this off of process.env. And now that we have this WorkOS instance, we can use all this cool stuff off of it. Today, we are going to focus on user management. And there's all sorts of methods here. The first one we want to do is create a user. And if we look at the arguments this takes, we can see we can pass an email right here. So let's pass in data.email, since we know that that is coming back from our form right here, since we're logging data. And we're going to see this little TypeScript error. It says type file is not assignable to type string. And this is something you run into a lot with Remix or any libraries that use form data. Because this is just form data, we don't know when it comes into our server, whether it is a file input or a string or a number. We just want to do a little validation on data.email. And we can use Node's built-in assert library to do this. So assert actually comes from assert node assert strict. And this function gives us all sorts of cool methods, including OK, which we can use to assert that type of data.email is actually equal to a string. So if we ever pass something into email to our server-side action here that's not a string, this will fail. It will throw an error. But the cool thing about this is that it narrows the type. So by the time we're down here, we know data.email is a string. Okay, create user looks pretty good. We see it returns a promise that resolves to the user. So let's go ahead and const user equals await that line. And let's just log this user right here. So if we scroll down, we'll see that our app has reloaded. Let's go ahead and click sign up and check this out. We already see the user object being logged. We have the email, we have an ID, we have created at and updated at, but check this out. We're gonna go back to our dashboard. I'll click users, and there we see Bob Barker is in our WorkOS dashboard. And we can click on him. We see his email address is right there. We don't have his full name because we just passed in the email. We didn't pass in the other fields yet, but pretty cool that it is already here. He's also not verified. So let's come back to the form and wire up the rest of these form fields from our front end. If we look here, we'll see first name is also a field. So we can grab data.firstname. We'll also grab last name, and we'll grab the password. And we're going to see these same type errors. We want to make sure that these are all strings. So let's just copy this and do the same thing for first name, last name, and password. Now there's one more option to create user. If we come down and look, we'll see email verified. By default, AuthKit requires new users to verify their email. But for this app, we're going to skip that. So we can just set this to true. And so all of our new users will be verified. So let's save this. We see the app is rebuilt. And let's come over here and sign up Drew Carey. And we'll say drew@pricesright.com. And we'll keep the same password. Now we see the object being logged again. It looks like email verified is true did work. And if we come back to our users, there we see Drew right here. The email is verified. We've got a full name, and we see that the provider was email and password. I mean, how easy was that to get this wired up? It's basically the single call to WorkOS, and we were able to use our entire existing UI that we've already built and wired up using any tech we want, in this case, Tailwind and Remix. Love how easy this is to get started with. Okay, now that we have created the user in WorkOS, we want to actually log them into our Remix app. So right now, even if we create a user and we refresh, there's no knowledge of them here in our app. We're going to use Remix's standard session cookie storage in order to save the user right here. So right after we create them, here is where we want to save them to our session storage. And I already have a little module right here, which uses create cookie session storage from Remix. This is pretty standard Remix stuff. And it gives us these three methods we can use to persist our user session to the browser. So let's come back to our register route. And right here, we first want to grab the session using get session, and that will auto import from that module. And this is a promise, so we need to await it. But now we have the session, and we can go ahead and call set and set any data we want. Let's just call this the user, and we'll pass this object right here, right into our Remix session. And now we need to commit the session now that we've updated it. And this returns a set cookie header string. This is going to be a string that we can use to actually set the cookie in the browser. And the way we do that is to return a redirect. So we'll go ahead and import this from Remix. After they sign in, usually it's pretty standard to redirect them back home. So that's exactly what we'll do. We'll pass in the home route right here. And we can also pass in a headers option and go ahead and say set cookie header is going to be our set cookie header string right here. So let's save that. And if I pop open the application tab and we look at the cookies for our app, we'll see that there's nothing here. Let's go ahead and click Get Started. And let's create an account for Alex Trebek. Alex@jeopardy.com. And we'll paste in his password. And check that out. We got redirected back home. Let's come over and look in our users table. There we see Alex. And if I go ahead and pop open the application tab, here we see our session for our TaxPal app. This has all the user data that came back from WorkOS. And even if we refresh this, of course, it's still going to be here. So now the session is durable. It's persisted in our browser, and we can read from it using the request headers to customize the UI and show the user that they're actually logged in. So let's do that now. Let's actually update this header to say, hi, Alex, because they're logged in. So we'll go ahead and close this. And let's find the index page, which renders this header. It's going to be right over here in routes index. There's our header. And in order to use the session data to customize this page, we need a loader because this page now depends on the request. So let's export an async function called loader. And a loader takes in loader function args. And we can destructure the request right here. And this request has a headers method that we can use to get the cookie header. So let's just const cookie and assign that to a variable. Let's just console.log this just to get some feedback here. And we can just return null for now. And if we pop open our terminal, look at that. Our taxpal session is now available to us on the server side that we can use to read the current user's session data. So the way we get the session data is with the get session method. And now this is coming from the cookie. If we await this and assign this to a session, let's go ahead and log the session. And there we can see all the methods on the session. The one we want is .data. And right there, we see our user object is hanging off of the data property of our session. So pretty cool. We have created a user, gotten all of the user info back from WorkOS, and we've persisted it to the browser's cookie storage. And now every time this page is loaded, reloaded, or visited again from the same browser, we can use the session's data in our loader and pass it off to our page. So let's do this now. We'll go ahead and return this as an object. Let's just put this under a key of session. I kind of like to do this because in Remix loaders, you'll often add other data right here. And so now you already have an object that does that. But in order to actually get this into our page, we want to use loader data. And we can pass type of loader here to get some type information. And now this is going to be all of our data. If we look at this, we're going to see it has a session key. So we can just destructure that like this. Let's go ahead and console.log session. And now if we open up the console in our browser, check this out. We've got session.user. So let's go ahead and pass session.user into the header. We'll give it a new prop called current user, and we'll pass in session.user. And now we'll go ahead and open the header. Let's give it a new prop of current user. And this is cool. If we actually just type in user, we'll be able to import this type straight from WorkOS's NPM package. So that's pretty nice. If we look at current user right here, we're going to see created at, email, verified, first name, all the data we need. And of course, we might not have a current user, so let's make that optional. But if we do, instead of rendering a get started button right here, let's say if we have a current user, we'll say, hi, current user dot first name. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and render that get started button. And check that out. Just like that, hi Alex is showing up here. Pretty neat. Even if we refresh, we're going to see it. So this is just bread and butter Remix and browser-based cookie session storage, working with that single call to WorkOS's APIs here. We're just adding it, light touches to the existing UI we already have. I love that these APIs are headless and we can do this. But now our browser knows who the current user is. Let's go ahead and let them sign out, which they should be able to do right here in this menu. And we'll see right now, it just says sign in. So this is going to be another piece of UI we want to customize based on the session. If we look in our header component, we'll see we have mobile navigation. That looks like a good candidate for what probably has this sign in button. And indeed, it is right here. So let's do the same thing. We'll go ahead and grab this so that we can pass the current user right into our mobile navigation. And down here where we invoke it, we'll just pass it in right here. Good old prop passing straight from our header. So now our mobile navigation has the current user. And if the current user exists, we don't want to render a sign in button, right? So if current user exists, we want to render something that says sign out. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and keep that sign in link. So if we check out this menu, we'll see now we see sign out right here. It's a little bit off. Let's take a look at this mobile nav link. It looks like it renders a popover button with some other props. Let's just grab this, go back to our sign out link, and we'll just use this right down here instead of a p tag, sign out. And all of these links look like they use an href, including the login button, because they actually navigate the page. But when we sign out a user in Remix, typically what we do is submit a form to let us run an action to clear the session cookie storage and then redirect the user. So we actually want this to be a form, not a link. So we don't need this as link prop right here, and we don't need this to prop. So let's just save that and check out the UI. Now it looks like this is centered. I think that's because links are left aligned, but buttons are not. So let's just add text left to this. And now this is looking a lot better. So when we click this, we want to submit a form. Well, let's go ahead and wrap this in a form, which we can import from Remix. And we'll give this a method of post. And now if we click this, we should see something that says we don't have that action implemented yet. We forgot one thing. This button needs to be type submit. Let's try that one more time. Click sign out. And this is letting us know we don't actually have that action implemented. So which route should we implement this in? Well, right now this is just on the index route. So let's come back up to the index route. Right here, we already have our loader, but this is rendering the header. And so that action will just basically delegate up the route hierarchy. And this is the first route it will hit. So we can just export an async function called action. This is going to take in action function args, which also gives us the request. And this action is actually going to look a lot like the one from our register page. So let me just close this components and lib folder. And in register, remember we used an action to create a user, and then we updated our session. Let's just grab all this session code. This is just good old Remix code. Come back to our index. Let's paste this in. And when we get the session here, we are working with an existing session from the browser from the request. So we want to use this header. So let's actually grab these right here to get the browser's current session. And we don't want to set a user, and we don't want to commit the session. We actually want to destroy the session. And again, this is just coming from our lib function right here. We can see exactly what it does from Remix. Deletes all the data associated with the session and returns the set cookie header to be used in the response. So very similar flow. We'll go ahead and just redirect back home, and we'll set that cookie header just like we did before. So this should be enough to actually log our user out. Let's go ahead and save this. I'll come over, refresh. We see Alex is logged in. Let's open this menu and click sign out and check that out. Love Remix here. Love how all the actions trigger the loaders to rerun. So we didn't have to wire anything up to get this UI to repaint. And if we open up our application tab in the dev tools, we're going to see that cookie is gone. So pretty neat. We now have creating a new user and signing them out. Let's do the last flow, which is sign in. So we'll see when we click sign in that we visit the login route. So let's come over here to our routes, log in. And here we see our form. And we'll see this is again using a Remix form with method post, which means we want to add an action right here. Let's come over to the register route, and I'm just going to crib this action function right here. Let's paste it in, and this will give us a nice starting point. So we'll import this type. Here we have our data. And in this case, we only have email and password. So that's all we need right here. Let's go ahead and grab this assert import from register. And we'll also grab workOS. And let's comment all this out for now. And let's take a look at workOS.usermanagement. And we're going to see all sorts of authenticate methods right here. We want authenticate with password. So if we look at the props that are available, we see email. Go ahead and pass in data.email. We see password. Let's pass that in as well. And TypeScript here is showing us there's still something wrong. And if we hover over it, it says that property client ID is missing. So let's grab client ID. And this is a string. And this is the other env variable that we grabbed from the WorkOS dashboard when we created our account. And so we need to pass this in. Let's go ahead and copy that. And we'll just use process.env.workOS client ID. And this needs to be a string. It could be undefined for now. Let's just go ahead and cast it to a string like that. And if we take a look at this method, we're going to see it returns a promise with a response. So let's go ahead and grab that response and we'll await that authenticate method. And response is a type authentication response. If we go to the type definition, we'll see it has our user and an organization ID. We don't need that for today, but the user is our good old familiar user object. So const user should be res.user. And now we can follow the rest of this flow here that we used from before to create our session in our Remix app with the user. So let's go ahead and import get session. We can just inline this right here. And we'll grab commit session and we'll grab redirect. So that looks pretty good. Let's come over and try to sign in Drew Carey here, drew@priceisright.com. We'll paste in his password and check that out. Hi, Drew, it says. If we go ahead and refresh, everything is still working. We see the UI has been customized. It says sign out. And if we come over and refresh our dashboard in WorkOS, check this out. Drew Carey is active. He has a sign-in count of 1. His last sign-in is right now. So this is pretty neat. We've basically added the ability to create users, sign them out, and sign them back in, all in our existing Remix application. And really, if you look at this, the only place we had to use WorkOS was right here in our login route. We called authenticate with password. That was one function that we used. And if we go to our register page and we look at the action, we called create user right here. Everything else fit perfectly into Remix's architecture and didn't disrupt any of the UI that we already had. And this is what AuthKit means when it talks about its headless APIs. We just get to slot them in here to our existing app. They work wonderfully with Remix's server-side APIs like actions and loaders, and it's built-in session storage. So I love how flexible these APIs are and how simple it is to really wire up user management for this app. And so far we've seen everything work great along the happy path. We haven't seen any errors. If we open up our console, it looks like everything is good. And if we check our server console over here, it looks like everything's good. But what happens if we actually have an error? What happens if someone tries to sign in with a bad password? Well, let's come over and we'll go ahead and log Drew out. And we'll go back to sign in. And let's just see what happens. Drew@priceisright.com. And I'll just say 1, 2, 3, 4. And here we see our app is throwing an error. It says invalid credentials for Drew@priceisright.com. And so let's come over to our login page. And this is getting rendered because this is the default kind of error boundary for our Remix app. That means our action is throwing an exception. And that exception is coming from this method right here when we try to authenticate. So because authenticate throws, we want to wrap it in a try catch. And that way we can return this error and use it to decorate the form. So let's go ahead and add a try catch. And we'll move all of this up here into the try. And now down here in the catch, we can deal with this error object. And here, this does look like an error object, but usually in Remix, go ahead and check if error is an instance of the actual error class. Then we know we have error.message. Otherwise, we could be dealing with anything here. So if we are dealing with an instance of error, and these AuthKit APIs all do throw errors, but just to kind of cover our bases here, we can go ahead and return an error and use the error.message. And this property is nice from these APIs because they are made to be used in our UI, so they're safe to display to the user. Otherwise, we'll just return kind of a generic something went wrong. And so now we have this error being caught. If we went ahead and refreshed, Drew at price is right, 1, 2, 3, 4, we shouldn't see anything. And that's because we're not using this return data. So let's go ahead and use the action data. We'll give it some type information, type of action, and we'll assign this to action data. And this may be an object with an error property or undefined. So let's come down and figure out where we want to put this. Maybe right below the password field, we'll say something like something happened. And let's go ahead and make this text red 500, maybe font medium, text small, something like that. And I think this looks pretty good. So now we can actually use the action data so that this message is coming from our server here, and we'll only render it if that exists. So we can say action data.error. If that exists, we'll render our little treatment here of the error message, and we'll replace this with action data.error. So now we don't have any fresh submissions. Let's try Drew at priceisright.com. 1, 2, 3, 4. Invalid credentials for Drew. Pretty neat. Let's say Sam at Price is Right. Invalid credentials for Sam. So again, pretty awesome that we're getting server-driven error messages here, safe for the user, safe for our UI. This is all the boring stuff that I never want to do when I'm adding auth to my app, but I do want control over what the UI looks like. I just love the way that this is all working together. Let's do exactly the same thing for registering a new user. Let's come click TaxPal. We'll click Get Started. And this time we'll register Regis Philbin. Good old Regis from Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And for the password, let's try typing in password. So here we're seeing the same thing. WorkOS is telling us the password does not meet the strength requirements. Again, the kind of thing I'm probably never going to add to my own app if I'm doing all this sort of thing from scratch, especially for a side project. But you can imagine all of the edge cases that are covered by WorkOS. Let's go ahead and copy all of this error handling code over to our register route. So right here, this is where we're calling create user. Let's wrap this in a try catch. We'll move all of this up into the try. And if we have an error, we'll just come back and grab this code from login, throw it in register. And let's go ahead and collapse this. We'll grab the use action data. We'll import that. And let's go ahead and refresh this. And we'll just design kind of the error state here. Maybe down here, right below password. Looks like a good spot. Something happened. We'll make this text red 500, text small, font medium. That looks good. So we'll grab the conditional logic here from our login template, and it should fit in right here. So let's try Regis again. Regis Philbin, millionaire.com. But let's go ahead and give Regis a password. And there we see password does not meet the strength requirements. Now it looks like we might be in a grid here. So let's go ahead and wrap this in a call span full. And now we don't get that wrapping. So pretty neat. Password doesn't work. But once we give him a strong enough password, we see that Regis can sign up just fine. So pretty cool. With just a few APIs, we have added registering a user, signing them out, signing them back in, and we've even added some server-driven error handling to our existing Remix app using AuthKit's Headless APIs. And we're really only scratching the surface here beyond this really cool dashboard that you can use to see everyone who has signed up and signed in. AuthKit and WorkOS have a ton of APIs for doing things like adding Google authentication or single sign-on. They obviously have organization management and all sorts of features. So if you are interested in learning more about AuthKit, check out authkit.com. It's an absolute joy to work with. And I love how easy it is to add it to frameworks that have great server-side support like Remix.